Hello, my name is Wildstack, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be covering this book, Fire Season, by Philip Connors. This book I purchased at Coas. The sticker, as you saw just a second ago, is still on the book. It cost $5.98. This copy has a postscript with insights, interviews, and more. And a little bubble on the cover that says, winner of the National Outdoor Book Award. The subtitle for this book is Field Notes from a Wilderness Lookout. The cover design is by Allison Saltzman, and the cover photograph is by Philip Connors. It's a picture he took from within his tower. The back matter reads, for a decade, Philip Connors has spent nearly half of each year in a 7-foot by 7-foot fire lookout tower, 10,000 feet above sea level, keeping watch over one of the most fire-prone forests in America. So this book is about a fire lookout tower and the person that looks over a district within the Gila National Forest. The Gila National Forest is not the oldest national forest in the United States, but it is home to the oldest national wilderness area, the Gila Wilderness Area. So, Philip Connors stays at a lookout tower overlooking the Gila National Forest, and he spends several summers there. Right off the bat, and this is one of the things that encouraged me to pick it up, I'm always a sucker for a book I find at a store that has a bookmark left in it, or notes left in it, someone has marked it, that kind of thing. One of the things I found is this. What this is a note card. On this note card, there's little doodles, stick figure doodles with a month and a little note about that month. All of this is in pencil, by the way. So the first month is April, the beginning month. May, the calm month. June, the fire month. July, the relations month. And August, the final month. I was thinking about doing another book today, and really the reason I decided to do it, and you may hear this because I'm not great at manipulating the audio on these videos, is there's a very strong wind blowing in my neck of the woods. It's not quite fire season, though that usually is March and April into May, right before the rainy season in this area. But the wind started really early this year, and the winds are currently sitting at like 40 mile to 50 mile per hour winds with 70 mile per hour gusts. And that's normal for the windy season, but it's unusual for the winter. Anyway, it got me thinking because last year, I think it's Calf Canyon Fire and Hermit Peak Fire combined into literally the largest fire on record in the state of New Mexico, the state I call home. And that was because there was a prescribed burn that the National Forest Service was doing in an area, and that fire got out of control and eventually, like I said, became the largest fire in the state's history. The reason that specific fire got big was because the windy season came early. And as I was sitting here thinking, I want to do a good book, this one was very relevant. The book itself deals with a lot of themes of loneliness and isolation, as well as an obsession with nature and the wilderness. Philip Connors is out here alone for months on end. He gets, I think, 8 days on, 2 days off, something like that. He only gets a couple days off for every couple weeks he's working. And so he spends a lot of time both reading books, playing games. He sometimes hosts visitors and hikers that get to the top of the mountain his tower is on. And that isolation affects the book. He talks a lot about his relationship, both with his wife and how that time can hurt that relationship. But he's the sort of person that can't easily be tied down. His partner knows that he is kind of that free-spirited person, and so she puts up with it, and they make the most of it when they are together. The prologue opens up with this paragraph. Until about 15 years ago, I thought fire lookouts had gone the way of itinerant cowboys, small-time gold prospectors, and other icons of an older, wilder West. Then a friend of mine named Mandy Jane asked for my mailing address in Missoula, Montana, where we were both students in print journalism, one of the least timely courses of study in the history of higher education, though we couldn't have known it at that time. MJ said she'd soon have a lot of time to write letters. When spring exams were over, she'd be off to New Mexico to watch for fires. He spends a while discussing this area. The next page he says, I needed no further urging. I'd already hustled too long and for no good purpose in the city, and when I finally looked out on that country with 24 mountain ranges I couldn't name, more mountains than a person could hope to explore on foot in a lifetime, I guess you could say I fell in love at first sight. And what a sight it was! A stretch of country larger than the state of Maryland, nearly 20,000 square miles of desert and forest, Sky Island mountain chains in 3 states and 2 countries. And so he says that he's spending time visiting MJ, but he spends the rest of the prologue discussing his qualifications for the job and how he got the job. This occupation is basically the same as the occupation you see in the video game Firewatch, but no one in the community would ever call it a fire watch. It is a fire lookout tower. And in that game, you do spend some time looking at a tool that they use to triangulate the starting location of a fire. And that is a tool that is on this front cover. It is also a tool that Philip Connors discusses in some length, but he also spends a lot of time getting used to. In this story are snippets like him seeing a fire, going out to check it taking a long time because it's rugged country and rugged terrain for those firefighters to get there and control it. He also discusses the story of a young man who comes out as a relief while Philip is on his days off. Someone still needs to watch that space. And this young man shows up, but he doesn't really show out very shortly after he quits the job because he doesn't like the isolation. It seems to be, when he signs up for it, an easy paycheck, but it's hard. And that lifestyle isn't for everyone. It is difficult to be isolated and alone for long periods of time. But Philip Connors is willing to do it and be there, both for the community of other fire lookouts in the area, as well as just for himself to do some thinking, to do some reading, doing all these different tasks. A lot of this also covers his relationship and how he meets his girlfriend turned wife, how he spends this time with her, the different challenges that she faces because he wants to be at this job for months at a time on a regular basis. So an example of this relationship discussion he has is on page 100 in the month of May. A couple of times a season, a day hiker works up the nerve to ask a personal question, and the exchange usually goes something like this. So, son, just curious. You're not married, are you? In winter, I'm married. In summer, I have a girlfriend who pays an occasional visit. Lucky for me, they're the same woman. Simplifies matters. Keeps me out of trouble. The hiker chuckles uncertainly, trying to wrap his mind around my riddle. And this is where he discusses how he met Martha and how he came to fall in love with her and how Martha came to accept this position of his that takes him out of the city, out of her life for months on end. She's still part of his life and he is still part of hers, but in very sporadic and small amounts of time. And what book about the Gilas would be complete without the author ruminating on Aldo Leopold and why that stretch of land is so important both to conservation and to preservation, but to the greater literature landscape. So he opens the chapter titled June with, "Among the high holy days I observe each summer, the 3rd of June holds a special place. On this day in 1924, Aldo Leopold's plan to preserve a roadless core surrounding the headwaters of the Gila River received approval from the regional office in Albuquerque. The proposal had been under consideration for 2 years, during which his draft memo and the accompanying maps were for a time misfiled and presumed lost. From a cultural standpoint, though, Leopold's vision for the Gila marked a decisive turn in America's treatment of wilderness. Never in history had a government body, American or otherwise, surveyed the values of so large a piece of country and decided that its highest use lay not in economic exploitation, or, as in the case of the national parks, scenic wonders, but in no use at all except by the non-motorized traveler. If country can be thought of as a text, then the Gila ought to be considered the first rough draft of the wilderness prospect in America." And so he spends this part of this chapter discussing Aldo Leopold's vision and how difficult it was during the early 1900s to get this idea in motion. But how that idea, once in place, has created something amazing in American history. And other countries have followed suit with similar designations of land. But America is the first. And in a way, this is a love letter to the United States of America from Philip Connors, how he appreciates that his country is the first to do this. I love any book about New Mexico, and honestly, I love any book about the wilderness and man's relationship with wilderness. It's because of that I appreciate this book. And I think if any of my other videos about the wilderness, or about even New Mexico, or more specifically, any of the things I have discussed in this book are intriguing to you, I would highly recommend you check this book out. It is worth it, definitely worth it for $6 used. I'm not certain I would have picked it up off the shelf and paid for it new, but having read it now, I would buy it again. And I think that is the highest praise I can give this book, is that I would pay money to read it twice. Anyway, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.